All right, we're here with Northumberland County District Attorney Mike O'Donnell. This is about coming up to your first year in office. Tell us so far what you've seen in your first year.
So it's obviously been a lot. A lot of stuff's happened this year. We've had a major backlog that we were addressing. So I'll just get into what I essentially had campaigned on, and so I'd always had talked about being a hands-on DA. You needed someone in the office every day, and needed a DA who, given the size of our county and the number of attorneys we had, you need to have a DA who's going to take his own caseload. So what I've done is the district attorney that essentially operates in Mount Carmel. I do all the magistrate cases there. I keep my own caseload on top of the administration tasks that you have to do. So I think it's important to be out in the community, be at these preliminary hearings, having your own cases, and kind of being able to keep your thumb on at least one specific area on top of the administrative tasks that you do. I mean, it is a significant amount of work that we're doing, but I asked for it, and I think it's what the people of the county needed. They needed someone who's going to come in here and work hard and maintain their own caseload and establish that culture throughout the office.
Have you seen an increase in crime since you've taken over? Because you come from the defense side, so you saw all that on that side. Now coming into this, have you seen a huge...
So I wouldn't say there's like a real increase in crime. Our biggest issue that we've run into is obviously you're going to have cases continually coming, but the backlog was so substantial that you had, you're essentially having these homicides and attempted homicide cases that you have to continually put work on, interview witnesses and continually, update these cases, and they have to go to trial sometime. It's unfair to the victims' families. It's unfair to witnesses and everyone involved if you're dragging cases on 3-4 years at a time. So we made that a major priority of my administration. I pretty much handle all the major cases myself, at least all the homicides and most of the attempted homicides as well. So if you'll see over the last year, we had the attempted homicide trial that wound up ending in a mistrial. We had the trial of Johnny Uhuru. We just had recently the trial of Corey Quincy. And so these were some of our major cases. The Randy Easton case is out on appeal right now. So of all the major cases we have, I think I was given about like 60, what I'd qualify as major cases.
Just so people know, these are all homicide cases or attempted.
Yeah, homicides, attempted homicides, like rapes, severe aggravated assaults. So we would kind of classify as major cases.
Have you seen an increase in them? In major crime?
I can't statistically. I don't know if I'd say there's been a large increase. Again, I'd say it was more of just the backlog that we inherited on top of the new cases that you're receiving every day. It's just at that breaking point where someone needed to come in and break that log jam, or you're at the risk. We probably already were overwhelmed, but you're over the risk of just being overwhelmed by, the sheer number of cases that we had. And if you look at those 60 cases I was talking about, outside of cases with bench warrants, I think we've addressed or resolved almost all of them. So by January of 2025, outside of, like I said, Easton, which is on appeal, I believe we'll have addressed almost every major case that I've been given.
I guess to say the increase, more so the severity of the situation, I guess, going in Sunbury is what it is. The what you have called gang activity going on in Sunbury. I guess that's one of the things to address. So obviously that has been a first here in a very long time. So,
well, I'll call it what it is. That's certainly what's going on. Now, it's not just isolated to Sunbury. These individuals have ties to Williamsport, ties to Shamokin, ties outside of Pennsylvania to New York and New Jersey. So although sometimes it can feel like it is more in Sunbury, like these individuals are tied throughout this area. And, you've had history, with our office of not addressing these cases in the way they need to be done. And, for example, There was, Anthony Moultrie was the victim of a shooting with Denari Springs. His case wound up being resolved, and then once his case was resolved, he would not testify against Mr. Springs, and that's what led to that case being essentially found not guilty. And so you don't want to resolve a witness's case or a co-defendant's case until they testify at trial. So there's different procedures that you can put in place so you can still essentially have that thumb on them, compel them to testify. Whereas once you resolve their underlying case, now you don't have anything to kind of compel them other than a threat of holding them in contempt, which is not going to sway some of these individuals.
Right, and obviously it's still ongoing with a wanted individual out there. And I know you can't give any updates on that, but for people who are watching, I guess, to say that police are on it.
Yeah, we're in daily contact with the U.S. Marshals. If anyone has any information on Mr. Springs' whereabouts, contact the District Attorney's Office, Sunbury Police Department, or the U.S. Marshals. We've been in constant communication. And then again, I'll say it again, if anyone's found to be harboring Mr. Springs or helping conceal his whereabouts, they're going to be punished severely. And so it's a matter of time till he does get picked up. But I mean, obviously this is going on much longer than I would have liked. I would really like to have him in custody, and for the safety of the people of the community, to be able to have him incarcerated and facing the consequences for what he did.
And with all of that behind, I know that when you took over office, that there was a bunch of different projects that you wanted to address and start. So tell us about some of the things that you're still working on or have.
So one of the first things I would address is the forfeitures. So last year we forfeited $0, which is truly unacceptable. As far as stiff sentences, will deter crime to some degree.
Right. So I can tell you about real fast on that is that we here at the Daily Item did a big thing on that many years ago, which I'd sent to you. And there was like a lot throughout the department.
Yeah. So and we're working on that.
What's the oldest one? Like 20 years or something?
Yeah, I mean, we applied for a forfeiture on 2 cases that are at least 15 years old, not too long ago. So, I mean, that's a process that takes some time. And, that's one of the frustrating things is, these forfeitures don't just happen overnight. I mean, you still have to go through the civil side of it. And, you can make that part of the plea agreement, which is what, we do for a lot of these cases. Is part of the plea agreement is that you agree to not contest a forfeiture. That's something that's 100% legal and, a process that if you put in place, now you're not having to go down the line and fight these forfeitures, years later when the case is resolved. So as part of the plea agreement, if there's any type of money or any type of vehicles or anything that was used for the drug activity or been purchased with drug proceeds, I mean, that's going to be subject to our drug forfeiture laws. And it just takes some time to get through. But by next year, I mean, given the status of where the forfeitures are at right now, I mean, I expect that we forfeit over $100,000, just in the next 6 months. And, like I said, the stiff sentences are one thing to help deter crime, but you got to take away the profits from it. If these individuals know that not only if you come to Northumberland County that you're going to get punished to the full extent of the law, but any money you make, I'm going to come take it. And so that is not only what helps deter these type of individuals, but our office could desperately use these resources. With the forfeiture funds, I can send officers to training. I can buy equipment that can help us prosecute crimes better. And to not have that fund, is a big hampering. And you have to go through the process, or eventually you never get any money from it. And so we've have an attorney specifically designated to the forfeitures. He drafts up all the motions for it. He's been kind of handling that whole process, and that in the next within 18 months of me taking office, I believe we'll have 6 figures that we'll have recovered in forfeitures.
And what was the other program? So that was one.
So I'm still working on the community service as well. I'm very frustrated by it, but I think we're at that point. We're almost over the the obstacle to get there. So that was one of my main goals, to have a community service program. I went to each municipality to see if they'd be willing to essentially supervise community service for adults. It's a little bit different for juveniles. You have to have a direct supervisor there. But for adults, we could essentially have the municipalities do it. Went to our courts on that. We drafted up some indemnity paperwork, that's just finally being finalized. So that's in the process of getting done. But I look to have that completed by next year, and hopefully before the end of this year is completed.
And the third one?
So not really. Well, I guess this would go to what we're looking forward to the next year. But I spoke about, like, when I was campaigning, changing our court system. When I got in, it was too late to change the 2024 court system, but I've already submitted a proposal for our court for 2025. And that will help us run on an actual system, that's efficient and, keeps us on these timelines that I've constantly spoke about. For 2024, we didn't have that. And I believe since we've made such a dent in our older cases, like the cases over 2 years, I believe I started with over 600 some, and now we're at like 100 and change. And so we've made a massive difference on our older cases, but the newer cases, until you have a system like this set up, you essentially don't have the real mechanism to quickly prosecute these cases. And speaking with other district attorneys, we don't have a first hearing. We're looking to get that set up where, when York County, for example, spoke to the district attorney there, they're able to close out 40% of their cases, give or take, at that first hearing. And if we can close out on 40% of these cases at the first hearing, on top of the work that we've done to chop off the backlog, I mean, you're going to have an efficient system here, and a system that really serves not only do the defendants have a right to a speedy trial, but you want to make sure for victims and witnesses that you're not dragging this on for years to come, because people move, people pass away, relationships change, and that also hampers your ability to prosecute cases, and you have to take these through in a timely manner. And so that's one of the things I've looked at. We've already submitted our proposal for that. I'm hoping to have that in 2025 and have a new system in place so that we can really run an efficient system and essentially follow the rules of criminal procedure, which I've been harping on for some time.
And one of the big questions that we were asked here to ask you and talk about was, so you did bring up the fact that there was a shooting at the courthouse, outside of the courthouse on that day, and it was kind of chaotic. So we obviously are a county of history, so it's a historic courthouse.
Yes.
So it's not the most upgraded, modernized, I should say. What did you see that day that you would, not necessarily, there's no blame or anything, it's just what would you see that day that you would like to now see moving forward? Because we did get a lot of calls and say, hey, is it even safe to go into courthouse anymore? And with that being said, we did also hear on the back end that one of the biggest things that happen is not necessarily a shooting because there's gang activity or whatever the case may be, but because that courthouse also holds a lot of custody cases, or divorces, or things that are really actually very, very contested on a daily basis that go on. So with that, that's, I think, was the major concern there, is that anybody that's been in the courthouse, it's kind of just, it's there. So it's not like you have all that.
So we're, I know the AOPC is coming up in November to really be able to discuss further specific protocols that we can put into place. I've addressed previously in the paper one of the ideas that I had that I think needs to get done as far as having armed security in the courthouse. I've been to courthouses all over the state of Pennsylvania. I don't recall ever being the one that doesn't. I'm sure there's some somewhere, but I mean, not in a county this size, of course. So that's a measure, obviously, I'd like to see put in place. And you're limited to some degree because you have a historical building. You can't just go and rip things up and tear parts of the building apart. Well, there's a meeting coming up with the AOPC. I've been in contact with our president, judge, and our court administrator about it, and I'm looking to have that add some wrinkles to our security.
So there are things being addressed.
Yes.
With it, yeah. But were you surprised that day when you just how?
Yeah.
Not necessarily because of that, just because of how maybe you weren't aware of how unsecure some things could be
So,
in the general area, I guess.
I mean, it kind of goes back to what you were saying before. I mean, although criminal cases obviously are dangerous, you're prosecuting, we were prosecuting attempted homicide that day. I mean, it's really the civil cases, the PFAs, the custody cases, children and youth cases, like historically, those are like more dangerous. I mean, you can do a quick Google search and you can see those are the type of,
There's no question.
yeah, I mean, when you're involving people's children and, taking their rights away, I mean, that is historically what you're going to see. And so, although this is obviously an incident that, should have never taken place, we should never took place outside our courthouse, obviously caused us to mistry a trial and, something that we're going to have to do again. Historically speaking, though, like the cases, the custody cases, the civil cases, those are actually historically more dangerous, and we obviously need to have procedures in place to make sure you address those issues because, this, this, what was I going to say? In this day and age, essentially, it's a shame that you have to put these type of protocols in there and make sure these measures are in place. But it's just like in schools, they did active training for or active shooter training in the school recently. They believe in Chickalemi, and that's something that no one wants to have their kids go through. But at the same point, in this day and age, it's just a procedure that you need to have done because that is sadly the world we live in, and so. But yeah, we are working to make that.
And one of the last two things here, then we'll let you go. But obviously, one of the biggest things that has always been sort of in the news, I should say, the jail. What have you seen so far at the jail since you are now on the prison board? Have you seen anything good, bad, ugly, or all of the above?
From the first, I think our warden does a great job. I mean, he's not given as much tools, as you'd need to do, and but at the same point, I think he does what he can to the best of his ability, but from our part, from the DA's office, what I could say is by not making it so we're pushing these cases through, you're not having guys spent there for 2-3 years. Like a county jail is not meant to be a long-term holding facility. It's a short-term facility, and you can't have individuals there for 2-3 years at a time, and to have those cases processed and, get the guys out that you can and the ones that need to be in jail, keeping them in jail. I mean, we move, probably for more bail revocations than I think have been done probably in the last 10 years as my office does. Because if you're out on bail, I've said this before, your job is to follow the rules. And one of those rules is to follow the law. If you're out committing new crimes, you violated your bail. So we move for bail revocations all the time. Now, of course, that's going to, put more individuals in our jail, but it also helps expedite cases getting short term, but long term it helps expedite cases getting resolved. And we try to we have a good relationship with our warden. We try to process these cases in the quickest manner, and like I said, the guys you have who are here for these violent, serious crimes who have been incarcerated for years at a time. I mean, as you can see yourself,
you can only serve like up to 2 years in a county, right? Anyway,
I mean, more or less. I mean, there's
some sit in here for 4 years, and it's longer than the time
they serve in state, and so more or less, it's basically county prison. Is on the back end is 23.5 months is what they call it. Now there are some exceptions that you could do to it, but mainly those kind of involve if your prison's not over occupancy.
What we're saying is that if you're sitting waiting to go to trial for 4 years,
yeah,
you're exceeding the amount of time you could have spent on a regular crime.
Yes, a lot of times, yeah. And then that makes it harder to resolve, at that point because you have guys with so much time credit in. And but we're working, like I said, to move along these cases, not make it so it's not a long-term facility. And like I said, I have a good relationship with the warden, and we try to, if anything comes up, try to be ahead of it and address it before the problem, becomes an issue.
And lastly, it's up to you. Whatever you want to tell the people in Northumberland County so far in your first year, and what's to come.
So I mean, we're working hard, for the people of Northumberland County. I'd say if you ask, the families of victims of crimes and witnesses, I mean, they would tell you, not only I made it a point of emphasis, that the crime that you went through, that's tough to deal with that alone. But you shouldn't be victimized by the system. You should not know what's going on with your case. And, you can ask these families and ask them about the change that they've seen in the office, that we we respond to calls. We address these cases, and I don't want them to feel like they don't know what's going on. I want them to feel like if they have questions, they can come to the district attorney's office and they can speak to us, and we can address these issues for them. So we don't try to hide from the issues. We try to address them full on. And what I would say in the future is that this getting Northumberland County the way it is right now, it didn't happen overnight. So this has been a long process for several years. We've had neglected our criminal justice system, and it got this way. It took some time to get this way. And so as much change as I want to do now and as much things as I want to get done immediately when I'm in, sometimes it just won't happen overnight. And so I think you can tell by the change of the culture, the amount of cases that we, what I've said I was going to do, like taking more trials. And I think we've probably done more trials this year than in the last few combined. And so, that's ultimately where a lot of these cases come to. You can't be afraid to take these trials. You have to take them forward. And, people need finality. They need closure with their cases. And so if you ask the people that have dealt with both, prior to me coming in and, my administration now, I think they would tell you that things have been night and day different. And I look to build on that, and my staff looks to build on, the success we've had and, keep on implementing these changes for the future.